After seeing him perform his ritual so many times, it might be easy to forget the fact that some of Dexter's kills were more gratifying and well-deserved than others. Let's look at some of the most satisfying Dexter kills, starting with a woman who unleashed havoc on the lives of almost everyone she met. Lila West. Lila West was one of the most manipulative and evil women Dexter ever involved himself with. A recovering meth addict, she had an incredibly obsessive personality and trouble respecting people's boundaries. Lila was a thief and a maniac who did pretty much whatever she wanted whenever she wanted to.
Exactly how full of shit are you?
Lila had no respect for anyone but herself, and she was willing to do anything she had to in order to get her way. She lied to Dexter, undermined his relationship with Rita, and even had him attacked by one of the men responsible for his mother's death.
Doubt what happened to the men responsible for your mother's murder.
Just to try and keep him dependent on her emotional support. When that didn't work, she tried to frame Sergeant Batista for assault in order to blackmail Dexter into staying with her. After Dexter had officially dumped her, she seduced Batista as part of her next move. One night, she visited him to help him paint his apartment, and they eventually went to bed together. After they had sex, Lila roofied herself in Angel's bathroom to make it look as if he drugged and raped her. Of course, he would never do that, and everyone around him knew that. Angel Batista is probably the most wholesome person in the entire show, so targeting him is especially despicable. But again, she didn't care what she had to do to get her way. Dexter was not swayed by her attempted blackmail. He went to the hospital and told her once again to back off.
Don't do this.
But she still wasn't willing to give him up. Dexter eventually managed to fix his relationship with Rita, and one day while he was taking her and the kids out on his boat, Lila broke into his car and stole his GPS to figure out what he'd been up to since dumping her. She tracked his recent location to the cabin in the Everglades, where he was keeping Sergeant Dokes in a cage. Dokes figured out that Dexter was the Bay Harbor Butcher and was immediately kidnapped by Dexter as a result. Determined to stay out of prison and keep his secret from being known, he took Dokes to the cabin he'd just used to kill his latest victim. He wasn't sure what to do with Dokes just yet, so he'd been keeping him locked away in the cabin while he thought of a plan. Unfortunately, Lila got there first, while Dexter was away with Rita and the kids. She blew the cabin to bits, killing Dokes to protect Dexter. She foolishly believed that it would bring them together again. But in reality, it upset Dexter. He knew that Dokes' death would make his life easier, but that didn't make it right. Lila fled the country, but Dexter found her anyway. She was living in Paris, thinking that she'd gotten away with all of the crimes she committed in Miami. Dexter ambushed her in her apartment, quickly tranquilizing her before reminding her of her crimes and stabbing her with a swift stab to the chest. She died almost instantly. Lila had hurt so many people, she tried to kill Rita's children and Dexter in a fire.
Could have had it all, Dexter.
Not to mention the way she treated Deb and what she tried to do to Batista's reputation. Add to all of that the demented way that she killed Sergeant Dokes, and it's easy to see why this kill was so satisfying for viewers to witness. She was an insane, manipulative killer who has no qualms about killing children for revenge, and she took out a fan favorite when she killed Dokes. The death of Lila West was hard not to savor, but she isn't the only wannabe femme fatale Dexter had to take out. Dexter has always despised people who killed children. His very first kill of the series was against a man who had been raping and murdering young boys. He killed a convicted pedophile, and he rescued the child the Trinity Killer tried to bury alive. He really cares about kids, so it's easy to understand why he would target a woman that he suspected of killing her own daughter, Officer Zoe Kruger, which was highly unlikely given how well she shot in every other instance. Dexter feigned interest in buying Zoe's house. After Deb died, Dexter fled Miami and lived in Oregon for a spell before landing in Iron Lake, New York. There, rather than return to a job in forensics, Dexter started a humble career at a local fish and game shop. It's while he was working there that he encountered Matt Caldwell.
Hey, easy there. A problem?
Matt was the son of a powerful man in Iron Lake, and with that privilege, he developed a pretty insufferable personality. Matt felt untouchable because his father was Kurt Caldwell, a highly respected citizen in Iron Lake. He was referred to in glowing terms, called things like a local legend and even Iron Lake's unofficial mayor. No one knew that he was actually an active serial killer who had killed over 30 young women. There is no doubt that Matt was neglected due to his father's murderous proclivities. Still, he was rude and unbearable, but more importantly, he was also a killer. On one occasion, Matt made the drunken decision to ram a boat he was steering into another boat that had at least 5 passengers. As a result of his grossly reckless behavior, 5 people died, and he and his friend were injured pretty badly, though they made it out alive. Dexter had taken an almost decade-long hiatus from killing, but something about Matt Caldwell was so irritating that he couldn't help but fantasize about killing him. The desire to kill him was only heightened when Dexter learned about the intentional boat wreck Matt caused that claimed 5 lives. Still, he resisted. That is, until his new ritual was violently interrupted by Matt one morning. To help keep him from killing, Dexter had taken to pretending to hunt a beautiful white buck in the forests around Iron Lake. The white buck was a protected species, so Dexter couldn't kill it even if he wanted to, but he didn't want to kill it anyway. He thought the buck was beautiful and only chased it to give him the adrenaline rush of hunting that he used to get when he would stalk and kill in Miami. But one morning, as he was engaged in this new ritual, just as he was getting close enough to the buck to pet it, the buck was shot dead. Dexter looked up to see Matt hollering and running towards him and the buck. He seemed proud of his shot and had no concern for the animal he just killed. Dexter also could have been shot in that moment. After all, he was incredibly close to the buck when it was shot, and Matt is a drug-abusing, alcoholic hothead, and he could have easily missed his intended target and hit Dexter instead. In that moment, Dexter was so enraged that he hit Matt in the face with his gun, just like he'd fantasized about doing before, and knocked him out clean. Dexter then staged the scene using the blood from the buck and took Matt away to eliminate him once and for all. He hastily prepared a makeshift kill room, strapped Mark down, and confronted him for killing not only the buck, but almost shooting him, and for what he'd done on the boat all those years ago. After Matt confessed, Dexter went through with the kill. He stabbed Matt center mass as he had done to so many others before. This kill is satisfying because Matt is the least sympathetic character introduced so far. He was annoying, a selfish murderer, and even threatened Dexter right before he died. Matt's death may have brought comfort to the families of his victims if they were ever able to learn about it. He was a murderer who killed his first victim because he was upset about how a deal at work shook out, and in the process, he killed 4 other people who had nothing to do with it. He had his dad frame his friend and then continued to treat everyone around him like garbage. Matt Caldwell was no saint. On the contrary, he was an incredibly terrible person who negatively impacted everyone around him. The only people who seemed to like him were his father and Officer Logan, who politely referred to Matt as a good guy. But in the end, he was just as selfish and despicable as he had been his entire adult life. Dexter probably saved a lot of people a lot of grief by avenging the buck and the people on the boat that night. Matt was dangerous, and it's impossible to argue that he didn't deserve what he got in the end. But he wasn't any more deserving than Ray Speltzer.
Ray Speltzer, just paroled for assault. But everybody didn't get those muscles pushing a lawnmower.
Ray Speltzer was an incredibly strange killer. He had managed to get away with at least 2 kills before ending up on Dexter's radar. He had the ability to kill without leaving much of a trace, which made it easy for him to slip through the cracks of the justice system. Because he was an unpunished killer, Dexter had a unique interest in taking him out. Speltzer's MO was to build elaborate, disturbing mazes and set women loose inside of them. The mazes were complete with loud, blaring music, barbed wire, flashing lights meant to disorient the victims, confusing turns, and dead ends. Once they were locked in the maze, there was pretty much no way that the women stood a chance of escaping. Speltzer would corner them and beat them to death before stealing one of the women's earrings for his trophy room. It is far from a typical MO for a killer, and it certainly made Speltzer stand out amongst the crowd of murderers Dexter took out over the years. What really makes Speltzer such a satisfying kill is the fact that he was so violent towards the women he murdered. He was also incredibly smug, even going as far as visiting the funeral for the last woman he killed. He clearly thought he would never face any consequences for his actions. Even with the most recent murder, he was going to be let off on yet another technicality. Maria informs the team that without a confession, there is almost no way they would be able to pin the murder on Speltzer. He was going to get away with it again, and he knew it. He taunted Deb as she left the funeral, knowing that she would be personally upset by the woman's murder, because that same night, Speltzer had also attacked Deb in the maze when she tried to save the girl. She wanted to bring Ray Speltzer in more than anyone after that night, realizing that it was her intervention in Dexter's ritual that freed Speltzer up to kill again. She felt personally responsible for his last victim's death and was in emotional turmoil after he seemed to be getting away again. Dexter was more determined than ever to take Speltzer out and was eventually able to track him down to the cemetery where he worked as a groundskeeper. He incapacitated Speltzer and got him strapped to a platform in the crematorium. When Speltzer came to, he tried to get free, he screamed and struggled, but it was no use. Dexter mocked him in his final moments before driving a stake through his heart.
Yell all you want, no one's gonna hear you.
And sending him into the flames to get rid of the evidence. It's very satisfying to see Speltzer incapable of using his huge size and brute force to get out of the bind he found himself in. Much like the women he killed, he was now at the mercy of a skilled killer, and nothing he could do would save his life. In the end, Dexter rejoined Deb and showed her the ash in the air, telling her that that's their guy. Speltzer was one of the worst, and seeing him lose, knowing the peace it would bring Deb, combined with the knowledge of how well deserved it was, makes his final takedown one of the most compelling of this series. His death was almost as long-awaited as Oliver Saxon's, the brain surgeon. Perhaps one of the most reviled killers in the series, Oliver Saxon was a maniacal fraud who was responsible for the death of Deborah Morgan, and she wasn't even his most shocking kill in his run. Because of how disturbed and ruthless he was, Saxon became one of the most threatening adversaries Dexter would ever have to face. Initially, he presented himself as a mild-mannered man who was innocently dating Dexter's new neighbor Cassie, but his intentions were actually quite sinister. Saxon started dating Cassie just to intentionally get himself closer to Dexter. Saxon, whose real name was Daniel Vogel, was upset with the fact that his estranged mother, Dr. Evelyn Vogel, had taken such a keen interest in Dexter, despite throwing him, her own son, aside when he was just a boy. Saxon was a psychopath. He killed his own brother when they were children, and this caused his parents to send him to a mental institution in England and cut off all contact with him. While there, Daniel faked his own death in a fire that also killed several other kids of their brain that regulated lack of empathy very closely. After she left him at the mental facility, Daniel built up years worth of resentment and was terrorizing Miami and his mother because of it. Daniel's crimes were a calculated means to punish and torment Dr. Vogel for abandoning him while assisting other psychopaths like Dexter. The beginning of season 8 was a bit of a wild goose chase. Dexter couldn't pin down the identity of the brain surgeon because he was very cunning. Dexter wouldn't discover his true identity until after Saxon managed to kill Dexter's neighbor Cassie, as well as his new protege Zach Hamilton, a young psychopath who had recently become a patient of Dr. Vogel's. He discovered that the killer was Dr. Vogel's son, and even after that, the brain surgeon was not going down without a fight. What was worse is that after discovering that he was still alive, Dr. Vogel was actually determined to help her son, no matter how dangerous he was. She lied to Dexter, who was set on killing her son to keep her, himself, and his son Harrison safe. Dexter found proof of the particularly brutal way that Daniel murdered Zach Hamilton. He showed a tape of the killing to Vogel, and she decided then that her son truly was beyond help. Together, she and Dexter planned to set a trap for the brain surgeon, but he caught on to the plan and made yet another incredibly disturbing choice. He slit his own mother's throat right in front of Dexter, saying that his mother had chosen the wrong son again. This was, of course, heartbreaking for Dexter to watch, and while he tended to Vogel in her dying moments, Daniel escaped. Dexter was left to call the police and report the murder, but he wanted the brain surgeon for himself more than ever after Dr. Vogel's death. Realizing Dexter would not stop hunting him without some sort of incentive, Daniel met with him under the guise of wanting to rent his apartment once Dexter left Miami with Hannah and Harrison. There, he personally threatened Dexter and his loved ones, warning him to back off and allow for a truce. Dexter pretended to agree, but in reality, he was creating another plan to kill Saxon. Dexter exposed Saxon's true identity to the press, revealing that he was the brain surgeon, and that led Saxon right back to Dexter's apartment with the intent to kill him. But before he had the chance, Deb ambushed him with a gun, and Dexter injected him with a tranquilizer. It seemed that Dexter was finally going to take him down.
I guess I'll live to see another day.
Oh no, you're still gonna die. Just gonna be in the electric chair.
But at that final moment, he decided to call it in and let Deb make the arrest and bring him in legally. Unfortunately for both of them, Saxon tricked a deputy marshal who had been investigating Deb and Dexter into letting him free from the chair Dexter left him strapped to. Daniel killed the marshal immediately and shot Deb just as she entered the room to apprehend him. She was horribly injured and sent to the hospital, where she later suffered a massive stroke, which left her effectively brain dead. As a result, Dexter decided to kill the brain surgeon by any means necessary. He had finally been taken into custody, and while he was locked away, Dexter pretended that he was going to do a test for gunshot residue. Instead, he baited Saxon into attacking him and then killed him by stabbing him in the jugular with a pin. Saxon spasmed and bled out on the floor right there. Batista and Quinn reviewed the tape of the attack, and it was quickly ruled as self-defense. It's obvious why this kill was so satisfying. The brain surgeon had committed so many murders with absolutely no consequences for so long. He killed so many people that Dexter cared about: his neighbor Cassie, his protege Zach Hamilton, his mentor Dr. Evelyn Vogel, and worst of all, his sister Deborah Morgan. To finally watch him be outmaneuvered and suffer a gruesome death at Dexter's hands was all anyone could wish for after all of the death and destruction he caused others. Not only that, but Dexter was able to pull it off on camera for everyone to see, but now he was the one who killed without consequence. Honestly, it was too good of an ending for Oliver Saxon, aka Daniel Vogel, but it was still finally his end, and considering all he'd done, everyone was waiting to watch the brain surgeon finally meet his match and take his last breath.